Hello and welcome back, Chuckle Crime Nerds. We are talking about Gavin Peterson, and he finally is getting his justice. At least 2 of 3 down and 1 to go. So, if you're unfamiliar with this case, we'll give you a really quick update and then we'll dive into the actual court recording of his father and stepmother getting their just desserts. Gavin Peterson was a 12-year-old boy from northern Utah who in July of 2024 passed away because of child or sure, we're going to split that up so hopefully we don't get flagged, and child abuse. So if I do child A and child T, that's what I'm referring to moving forward. And it was pretty heinous. So I won't go into a lot of details because the judge lays into them and talks a lot about it. So let's get into it. If you're new here, I'm Annette Lyon, USA Today best-selling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff. Also award-winning author, former editor, a whole bunch of other things. Here we discuss true crime often, but not always, where it intersects with religion, and then we have chocolate on the side because you gotta have something sweet in the middle of all the bitter. I have opinions, I rant. That's what we do here. We respect all faith traditions and those with no faith traditions. That includes my faith as well. And a quick reminder to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and helps other people find this kind of content who would be interested in it. Ready? Let's go. Let's just say that Judge Camille Nider is my hero. I love this woman. She is fantastic, and she gave Gavin his justice. First, we will watch the sentencing for his father, Shane. Just brace yourself. The trigger warnings of all kinds in this one. There's a lot.
As just a brief recap, we have 3 named victims. Of course, Gavin has been the forefront and should be the forefront. The fact of this case is probably the most distressing fact of this case is the absolute dehumanization of Gavin. And I want to say his name again, Gavin, because they took that name from him. Shane took that name from him. He was never called by his name. He was called by other pejoratives. Gavin was dehumanized, isolated, starved, beaten, and ultimately died. This defendant, as his biological father, did nothing to stop what Nicole did, and he also actively participated in the abuse.
Clarify, Nicole is the stepmother.
When the school called out, he said, "Don't feed." When DCFS came to the door, he said, "You're not allowed in my house." Shane took the benefit of a bargain, and we would ask that the court uphold that bargain, which was to give him the maximum sentence possible. Thank you.
So fortunately, Shane and Nicole both pled guilty. Yeah. And they know that they're up for potentially the worst possible sentences, as frankly they deserve.
After this ultimate incident of Gavin's death occurred, Miss Peterson and I, we had to go to the courts to get possession of Gavin's body to bury him in according to the wishes of his mother. It was only after we got that court order that then we were reached out to potentially try to cremate his body and split the ashes, which was obviously abhorrent to what Gavin had to go through because he deserved to be laid to rest away from this terrible person that allowed this to happen to him.
To clarify, his father wanted some of his ashes. No. Absolutely the heck not.
The way that this man has used his money and his power to manipulate the court system to get full custody of Gavin, to allow this to happen to Gavin, to his children, and to the mother of his children is absolutely abhorrent. For the survivors of homicide victims, justice has nothing to do with handcuffs. And they will never get full justice. And Gavin will never get full justice. And the only way to even get an iota of that is to make sure that this man never sees anything other than those walls of the prison. Thank you.
So just a little bit of background, just to refresh our memories. They had him going to school like as normal, and there were several teachers, there were lunch ladies, there was bus drivers, there were people who are reporting this boy, there's something going on. He is trying to sneak food. He looks malnourished. He looks, there's something is wrong here. And so CPS was called several times. And for whatever reason, they weren't able to keep a case open or do anything about it. But the family was like, oh, we probably should cover our butts. So August of 2023, they decided to homeschool him. And that meant no more teachers reporting, no more lunch ladies reporting. No one else was going to report because he's going to be locked up in a diaper in his room and all this other stuff. So, yeah, that's what happened. And his mother had no idea. She had lost custody. Now, I'm sure there are issues with her life. I don't know her past, but there's a pretty dang good chance that he would have been far better off with his mother.
To my kids, especially my daughter, I'd like to express how deeply sorry I am for my role in the abuse and the trauma that they all went through in my home. I've had several opportunities to interfere and protect you, but I chose not to do so. I am truly sorry, and I hope that one day you can forgive me. To my ex-wife, I am so sorry for how Gavin was treated in my home. I allowed this abuse to happen, and I did nothing to stop it. This abuse no doubtly was the cause of his demise, but also robbed you of the opportunity to know and love our son. I am so sorry from the bottom of my heart, and I hope that someday you can forgive me.
Spoiler, that's the last of the emotion you're going to see from Shane Peterson. He has basically a flat face, no emotion, nothing on his face for the rest of the hearing. So, oh, I'm sorry. There weren't even any tears. That was like the saddest, pathetic attempt at showing emotion, and it was clearly fake.
Someone in Mr. Peterson's situation has the presumption of innocence until a jury decides that he is guilty or until he says the word that he is guilty. That's an obligation for the court to uphold and to protect until that change is made. As part of that, you might be surprised that as a court, we don't know a lot of information about a case until really we either go through an evidentiary hearing, maybe a preliminary hearing, which we didn't have in this case. In addition to that, we didn't have a trial because Mr. Peterson and the state came to an agreement. And so really, up until the time he pled, in an abundance of caution and trying to presume that and to afford you that constitutional right of presumption of innocence, I haven't known a lot about the case.
Good for her.
And it was deliberate on my part. There was videos that were provided to me and photographs that were provided to me, but they're not ones that are going to be made public under any circumstance.
Good.
Because I think it's everyone's position, and especially my position, that anyone getting a hold of those, certainly would be detrimental to Gavin's legacy. And that Gavin's legacy should be the picture that I have seen, and until the other pictures were sent over, the only picture I have seen, the school picture of him.
The one I
with
will
his
be
big
using.
smile, and I think that the media has used that as a family photo, but I think that is the only legacy that should be able to be found by anyone who is searching for him. There was a report that was written by Dr. Lasky, who's with the University of Utah.
She's going to read the report, and I'm going to play it because it's heartbreaking, and I think it's important in honoring Gavin.
And I want to read part of this so it's clear in the record. First of all, she does outline that Gavin passed away when he was at the hospital, that McKay-D surgeons made heroic attempts to try and save him, and he died in the operating room where they were doing that. That Gavin's autopsy revealed he had sepsis, which was a bacterial infection in his blood, and it's led directly to his death, with additional relevant findings of dehydration, pneumonia, malnutrition, and severe bed sores. The investigation revealed significant concerning indicators of what he was enduring at home. He was always hungry and scavenging food. Due to repeated attempts to have his safety evaluated by DCFS, his caregivers ultimately removed him from school entirely, further worsening his isolation.
He endured not being allowed to wear clothes other than diapers, being force-fed and possibly volitionally, meaning he then started to eat it on his own, feces, being subject to extreme discipline, confinement, and forced tasks such as cleaning in ways that would have been considered outside the norm. In the days leading up to his preventable death, his father reported he was vomiting and had at least one seizure. No medical care was sought. It's likely that the symptoms described were the early signs of the bacterial infection that would soon kill him. Notably, he has multiple possible explanations for the sepsis: ingestion of the feces, the severe bed sores, malnutrition leading to pancytopenia, which I had to look up too, but it's a blood disorder, and subsequent reduction in immune response.
So that one blows my mind too. He had multiple causes for the sepsis: the open sores, pneumonia. Did the malnutrition make his immune system so weak he couldn't fight? I mean, so many contributing factors, and they can't point to what specifically caused the sepsis because there were just too many factors.
The information available in this case is clearly consistent with severe psychological abuse, physical abuse, malnutrition secondary to food restriction, and child torture. Gavin likely endured unimaginable suffering in the weeks, if not months, leading to his death. The history provided is consistent with child torture. Child torture is a medical diagnosis that includes components of severe physical abuse, restraint, unusual disciplinary practices, starvation, and severe psychological abuse, including isolation, spurning, verbal, and terrorizing.
It's an actual medical diagnosis.
Child torture often ends in the death of a victim, but prior to the death, the child is so psychologically traumatized, it is not uncommon that they will begin to manifest psychiatric symptoms. A child of Gavin's age is still dependent on caregivers to provide food, shelter, clothing, safety, nurturing, and medical care. Considering the psychological Gavin endured, being isolated from children at school, outside contact with anyone, restriction to his room, constant monitoring with cameras, not being allowed to wear clothes, being forced to wear diapers, being deprived of love and medical care, all would have been profoundly impactful on his psyche. By report of the school contacts, this was an essentially normal child who was driven to a point of psychological breaking. He would have been cognizant of what was happening, understood that it was wrong, and that the adults in his life who he should have been able to rely on for all things
Just to catch her breath and gather her emotions.
were, in fact, his tormentors. It is without question that Gavin experienced physical pain prior to his ultimate death. His body was riddled with evidence that he was beaten more than once. The lack of body fat and diminishing muscle likely made the pain worse.
It's an element I hadn't even considered till I heard this. The lack of body fat means you're going to bruise and those bones will hurt even more. There's no padding.
And I can tell you this is part of why the state has kept their presentation short. To summarize, the physical injuries identified in Gavin, his state of malnutrition, and the subsequent history obtained support that he endured child torture in the days and weeks, if not months, leading to his death. He would have been cognizant of what was happening, how he felt, and who he should have been able to turn to for care and support. He would have been hungry to the point of being willing to risk known physical consequences in order to obtain any sustenance, to keep him alive, and to overcome the innate disgust of ingesting feces. He would have felt fear and sadness and pain. Furthermore, his siblings would have sustained psychological trauma as a result of being in the same environment.
Well, they did mention earlier that there are 3 victims named, and the other 2 are also siblings. We don't know how severe it was with them. Now, I will also point out that his older brother was also charged. He was an adult, and he carried out much of this child A that was ordered by Nicole and not stopped by Shane. He will be sentenced later. He too pled guilty, but they said that he may have diminished capacity. He's autistic on some level, and they're doing further testing to see how severe and how that may have affected his culpability. He definitely needs to face consequences. And he was not even barely an adult. He was, I think, 21 or thereabouts. I suspect he too had been a victim and knew that if he didn't do X, Y, and Z, that he would also suffer. So it's a little more complicated with him. So it's not to diminish what he did, but it is a little bit more complicated. So I don't know if he is considered one of the victims, even though he probably had been at some point. Just clarifying that. And as far as I know, we don't have a sentencing date for him yet.
As a judge, we are to sentence based on the facts. But nobody sits here devoid of emotion, empathy,
Unless you're Shane Peterson. Nothing on his face, nothing.
human experience.
After hearing all that, nothing.
Or just common sense. You don't have to be a parent. You don't have to be a criminal. You don't have to be any of those things to think, oh, maybe this should be wrong. The
You
reason
think?
I emphasize that, and it does make me emotional, because I think of, first of all, you were Gavin's dad. I don't think you deserve that title anymore, but there's nothing that can be done to change it. You
Again,
certainly
I
were
love
not
her.
his father, and you certainly were not his protector. I don't believe for a minute that you weren't part and parcel of a significant portion of the abuse that he endured.
Yep.
I also find it telling that I'm more emotional about this than you are. And
Yep.
I think that there is reason for that.
He doesn't even lower his head in shame or nothing. He's just staring straight ahead.
I don't think there are enough adjectives and adverbs to adequately describe how awful this situation is. And the fact that I'm teary about it is the first time in 25 years that I can think of that I have ever gotten teary in court, other than something I was here for of a personal nature.
She looks pretty tough. She looks like a little bad A over there. And if she's crying on the stand, holy
And
no.
part of that is because this case compares to none. I've prosecuted and defended child homicide cases, and I know what goes into that. But this has got to be one of the hardest situations any of them have dealt with. And it's absolutely unacceptable that your behavior was such that it ever took place more than once, that you allowed, condoned, encouraged, facilitated, and probably participated in any one of those instances.
Now she says probably because we don't have things like video evidence of certain things because a lot of it was deleted. They had cameras in Gavin's bedroom that they could watch what was happening. Nicole would watch the cameras and then instruct his brother to do X, Y, and Z. And turn him around so I can see better on the camera. And when they called 911, when he was unresponsive, they found that she had put him in the shower. And I was trying to cool him off. Maybe you're freaked out trying to revive him, or maybe you're trying to punish him for throwing up again or something stupid. But when they finally called 911, they actually tried to take the cameras and hide them in the shed. And fortunately, there were neighboring cameras that caught that. The brother was hiding them, surely on their command. But they hid a lot of evidence. So no, we don't have proof that Shane was involved directly in a lot of this, but she has no doubt he was. But he pled guilty to the charges, so it doesn't matter directly.
Let alone instances that went on daily, for weeks and for months, and potentially even years. It doesn't help you that a lot of the text messages and the cameras were hidden, and there was an attempt to cover up. Because anything that you might tell me to explain why falls on deaf ears. If there was evidence of that, you wouldn't have deleted all of the things that got deleted. So the presumption really is that those were things that were going to be worse than what we do actually know. We don't know how long it went on. We don't know how many times you actively participated or how many times you were just aware of it. But the truth of the matter is, and I agree with what Ms. Toombs said, you dehumanized that little guy. It resulted in his death. And the responsibility for that lies at your feet. I don't think that there is anything that, looking back in your past, and I got a couple of letters in support for you that wanted me to understand what kind of a character you really are, what kind of character you really have. I want you to understand that those things that you might have done that were good in the world have all been completely wiped away and eliminated by what happened here. I can appreciate you've made use of your time over at the jail, but to think that you might think that I care one bit about some of the courses that you've taken over at the jail, and that in any way that may balance what has to happen here, you are wrong. Those are pieces of paper that are shallow and pale in comparison to the life that you contributed to taking. And I hope that you understand that.
He doesn't.
I agree that you should be given the maximum sentence. I am going to run it consecutive. I also am going to encourage the board to keep you until you die. That is up to them.
So this is the part of the Utah sentencing system that I cannot stand, that it is up to the board to have the minimum, and then it can go to life. And then the board will decide along the way when that will be.
But there is no, if you're able to do this to your own child and allow it to be done to your own child, I cannot fathom that you can be rehabilitated. And it doesn't, again, make a difference that you don't have a criminal history. I don't think there's any price that you can pay, any penance that you can offer up that the board will recognize as penance significant enough to make it safe to let you out. There's a lot of cases where I want somebody to have a glimmer of hope, that maybe if they go down to the prison and try, that maybe they'll get paroled.
I love this.
To be brutally honest, Mr. Peterson, I don't care if you have that glimmer of hope. I'm not going to send that glimmer in your direction.
Love her.
Board of Pardons might. But I do think you're entitled to the maximum sentence of this case. In connection with your conviction for child abuse homicide, recklessly causing the death of Gavin, that's a first-degree felony, and the court will sentence you 5 years as a minimum and up to life as a maximum. I will run those consecutive with each other, consecutive with any other sentence that you may be serving.
So also another frustrating part is this, I think if it's a class 2 felony, it's a maximum of 30 years, something like that. But the child abuse homicide is to life. Thank heavens. So, and it's all this is consecutive. So even if it's a 30, he still has the child abuse homicide that will keep him there longer. Okay, so now let's look at the sentencing for Nicole. She reads the same report, so we'll skip that part. But I want you to pay attention to Nicole's emotions, because she does show a lot of emotion. In my opinion, just spoiler alert, it's not guilt. It's not regret. I think she's terrified. She's terrified she got caught, and she regrets what she did because she's going to prison as someone who did the things that she did. And I don't think women in prison who did that are going to be treated well. I think she's scared to death. But I think it's a panic attack. I don't think it's regret.
Full of text messages, photographs, Facebook messages that investigators were able to recover during the course of the investigation. I included some of those texts, and obviously not all of them, but I included some of those texts. When talking about how naughty Gavin was in July of 2023, a year before his death, Nicole is asking Tyler, how much did he drink? Like, the can almost is empty. Response from Tyler, about a quarter. From Nicole, I bet he's done that before. From Tyler, I'm sure he has too. From Nicole, and this is why the door is locked to the room, because he's sneaky.
I'm sure he's done this before. Yeah, try to survive because you don't have enough liquid because you're dehydrated and you're dying. A quarter of a can of soda. I hope it wasn't diet, so there's some calories there, but that's what, 3 ounces? That's nothing. That's less than you'd feed an infant in a single feeding. Like, you can't survive on that. This poor child.
That is the transgression that warranted locking him in his room.
And probably what Tyler feared would happen to him if he didn't do these things. But I still think, Tyler, you're an adult. You knew better. You could have gone to the police. You had plenty of evidence.
In terms of other bases for taking him out of school and homeschooling him, they didn't want DCFS called. In one exchange between all of them, Nicole reports that the school nurse had called her, and in her text message to Shane and Tyler, the group message, she says, "Get ready for more DCFS."
More?
In another text responding to a concern that the school nurse had raised, she texts, "He does this for attention. I effing hate him." She used the entire word and capitalized it. "And it makes me hate him more and more." She shoves the blame off on Tyler. She says Tyler should have taken better care of his brother. But yet there's text messages that have been recovered where she is the one who's ordering Tyler to punish Gavin, make him do push-ups, make him lay flat on the floor with his hands straight, make him get back in the box, make him...
Back in the box? The level of dehumanization is just, this is like a POW, only worse. The Geneva Convention prohibits this crap, and this was a child.
beat him, make him eat soap. She would not give him drinks. There's text messages where they talk about the fact that she hadn't given him anything to drink that day. The only thing on the day that he stole the can of Shasta and drank a quarter of the can, she had not given him anything to drink. As we go through Gavin's death and understand why he died, Nicole Scott is at the forefront of it. Nicole Scott chose to lock him in his room. Nicole Scott would take photographs of his injuries. Nicole Scott watched him on the camera.
Can you imagine deliberately taking pictures of the injuries? That might make sense if you had like a telehealth appointment. Doctor, look at this picture. But if you're not doing that, which she clearly was not, then why did she take the pictures? Because I believe she's a sadist. She found some sick pleasure in looking at the injuries.
And would tell Tyler every time Gavin did something, go punish him. One of the photos that was located, and the court has seen a copy of it, shows a very serious wound in his groin. Gavin died from sepsis. And as the court knows, that sepsis, it could have come from that wound in the groin.
But he had a severe sore in his groin, likely made worse and or caused by wearing a soiled diaper constantly. Infection, of course. It's just the level of cruelty. I mean, it would make sense if to say, "Oh, I didn't know." If you lived 300 years ago before we understood germs.
She took a photograph of that on June 28th. She did not seek any medical care for him.
This is weeks before his death. She's reveling in the injuries.
She reports, "I had no idea that he was so sick." And yet
I just
she's
take
the
pictures.
one watching him on the cameras. She's the one photographing him. She's the one keeping him in a diaper. She's the one locking him away so he can't clean himself, so that he can't use the restroom.
If you're gonna get mad at a kid for soiling themselves, then let them use the bathroom. Like that.
She convinced friends, neighbors, family members that Gavin was a bad kid.
Can you
And that she
imagine?
was just, when they saw her punish him, he was just such a bad kid. Family members report that during group family activities, Gavin was made to sit off to the side. He was not allowed to interact with the other kids. Her story, nobody ever saw this, was that Gavin would beat up on people, that he was mean, that he would do other things. Yet she and her co-defendants are the only ones who ever report that.
Part of me wants to get mad at the relatives who didn't ever question it. But at the same time, lying about something like that and the way they treated Gavin is so egregious that I think for most people, it never crosses your mind that someone would lie about, oh, he's going to beat up my kid. You're like, well, okay, if he's a dangerous kid, maybe I'll keep my kid away. You don't question that. You don't think that someone is going to be a sociopathic sadist. That's not how most of us go through the world. But these people are something else.
She is sitting here pretending to show remorse for what she did. The remorse is that she's facing a major consequence.
Yep.
Not because of what she did to Gavin. Her remorse didn't start until she was charged, until she had to come face the consequences for what she did.
I don't know if you can hear it, but if you pay really close attention, sometimes you can hear this little, this little high breathing. That's Nicole Scott freaking out into her microphone. And if it's real pain, I hate to say this, but good. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy.
She had no remorse when Gavin was being given CPR on her floor. She had no remorse when Gavin was rushed to the hospital. Frankly, she didn't even have remorse when she answered the questions in the PSI.
And the PSI is the pre-sentencing investigation.
Your Honor, Nicole Scott deserves each and every second of imprisonment.
Yep.
And I think that I want to pick out one thing that they said, and this is on page 3. This family deprived Gavin of food, love, dignity, clothing, and protection. And when they learned others in the school were providing for him, they intentionally put an end to it. No matter how long the individuals in this tragedy spend incarcerated, there are systems in place guaranteeing their basic human rights. Those fundamental human rights and system were non-existent for Gavin.
Yep.
Nicole was abusive to her stepdaughter, shaving her head, choking her, threatening her. I could go on.
What is it about these types of people who shave kids' heads and girls' heads in particular? Ruby and Jody did that too. It's like a special form of torture. They know it.
Also endangered him and put him at risk by placing him in a home where it normalized such abhorrent behavior, where it normalized a child, her biological son, sitting and playing video games and complaining because Gavin was knocking.
Think of that. The kid is playing a video game and he's annoyed. Make it stop. Gavin's knocking on the door. And picture Gavin on the other side. All he wants is to use the bathroom or get a drink or have some food. Not be alone. And yet this kid has been taught that this is normal behavior to be annoyed with a fellow child. I don't know how old this child was, but that's disturbing.
Normalized the fact that a child is locked in his room and the other family members don't really know anything about him.
Or care.
Normalized that it's okay to hurt and kill your child.
Okay, so just heads up, there's going to be a argument here about, oh, and hurt offense, which is heinous and upsetting. Brace yourself. I know he's trying to be diplomatic and all that, but it's also infuriating.
To understand that nobody here is here for any reason that would be pleasant. Everyone here realizes that there's been a terrible tragedy, and that includes Miss Scott.
Does she think the tragedy is for her, like Lori does? Because, again, I'm getting tired of that word being used in court by the defense. Is there a tragedy here? 100%. It's not a tragedy for Shane. It's not a tragedy for Nicole. It's a tragedy for Gavin, and it's potentially a tragedy for Tyler. But it's a tragedy for the other children who were subjected to this monstrous behavior.
When we're in the middle of things, it's difficult for us to recognize the reality that's around us. Gavin was, no question, a challenging child. He was difficult to discipline.
Based on what? The only thing we've heard is Nicole and Shane saying he was difficult. No teacher said that. No anyone else. There's no one else has said that he was a difficult child. Only Nicole and Shane. And can we trust a word out of their mouths?
And to care for, but that does not excuse the way he was treated. Miss Scott and Shane Peterson recognized the challenges. They participated in counseling for a year.
Oh, good for them. It clearly did absolutely nothing, as it wouldn't for sociopaths. You have to have an emotionally available heart. You have to be human, at least as human as the Tin Man, to have therapy work.
Related specifically to parenting Gavin. They sought help from DCFS, but that didn't last.
Did they seek help from DCFS, or did they attend some classes to not be in trouble with DCFS? Those are very different things.
Nicole was overwhelmed. She was. For example,
Poor
Gavin
baby.
would urinate on his mattress, on the rug, on the floor. So she removed them. What do you do? What do you
Okay. He was a difficult child because he wet the bed. Well, like if a child regresses, they're 12 and they're wetting the bed. It's probably not something intentional, probably something happening as they sleep, meaning they're completely unconscious and can't control it. And B, it's often a sign that they've been, I don't know, abused. So how about you get him help and stop the behavior that is causing him to regress? Because he didn't just regress in a vacuum. Let's put it that way.
do when you give them a mattress and they urinate on it to the point where it just stains? What do you do? Well, she did what she did. Now,
Then if she really had been a decent human, then you give him blankets, and so he has something to sleep with, something to sleep on, to cover himself with, and then when those get dirty, you wash them and then give them back. If she really truly didn't know what else to do, but you still provide something, but she's a monster, so no.
I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to help the court understand that at the time, she was so overwhelmed that it was difficult for her to think straight. Now, you take that and then you place on top of that the fact of her own abuse as a child. And I don't understand the dynamics. I don't understand the logic, but I do know from experience, from seeing many, many cases.
Wait till you see how the judge responds to this particular part. It's great.
Is that often those that have been abused, for some reason, end up being more abusive than you'd think it would be the opposite, but it's not for some reason. During that time, she believed she was doing the best she could. It sort of snowballed on her, and at some point, She was so overwhelmed that she just couldn't cope. She's not here acting today, and she's not here just because she got caught.
I don't think she's acting. I think she's genuinely having a panic attack, but that doesn't mean it's remorseful.
Here crying because she knows she's going to go to prison. She's here because she recognizes now just how terrible Gavin was treated. She recognizes now, sort of
Nope.
having gotten her head up out of the fog and being able to see reality again.
It'd be great if her lawyer could see reality.
And she's truly sorry. She is. It's not just, oh, I got caught. She has willingly accepted a more severe punishment than Shane did. She knows the consequences.
She accepted this most serious punishment because there's so much evidence against her, and then a trial would be miserable and hard, and she clearly is a weakling and can't handle confrontation, so she can't handle a trial, and she knew she'd be guilty anyway, so might as well just plead. It's not that difficult to figure out. She doesn't want to be in court. She didn't plead guilty out of any nobility or any sliver of goodness in her soul. No, she has none.
Extreme sentence that she can receive under these circumstances, she's already agreed to that. She knows that's what she's expecting.
So he's then kind of implying that because she's willing to take the full sentence, the max, we should be lenient because she's willing to take the whole responsibility. No, this woman is a monster. She's too dangerous to let out. No.
Explain, nor can she, why things became the way they did, why they went
They're a
from
monster.
having a difficult child to treating him in a way that just never should have happened.
Saying that she treated him in ways that shouldn't have happened, that's a light year away from the fact that she tortured and killed him. Treated him in a way that shouldn't have happened is, oh, she yelled at him one day when he didn't obey her, and maybe she got a little too loud and maybe swore. Or that's something that you could say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and then maybe she would apologize. But that's not even in the same universe, woman. Like, no.
When the police went in, they took pictures of the place, and there's medicine all over. They knew he was sick to his stomach. They had all kinds of medicine for his tummy ache. It wasn't that they were oblivious.
It wasn't that they were oblivious. They were trying. If they were trying to treat his tummy ache, it was only so he wouldn't throw up because they didn't like cleaning it up. And then they would probably not feed him or give him water because, again, he'll just throw it up. So he's driving me crazy. I get it's his job, but
In their own feeble way, they weren't completely oblivious to Gavin's plight.
no, I agree on that. They weren't completely oblivious. They caused it and were gleefully reveling in it. That's the problem.
At the end of the day, it's just a tragedy. It just is. And there's nothing she can do to make that right.
There are few words strong enough to describe the cruelty that Gavin endured at the hands of the defendant. This was not a case of neglect. This was prolonged torture, carried out by somebody who was supposed to be a parent, but treated him with less care than most of us would offer a stranger. The evil stepmother in Cinderella, someone we often point to as the embodiment of cruelty and evil in fiction, would have been a better parent to Gavin than the defendant.
Cinderella at least had a roof over her head and food and clothes. I guess Gavin technically had a roof over his head, but he wasn't given clothes or food. So
she watched him waste away through cameras in his room. She gave him a demeaning, inhumane nicknames and refused to even acknowledge him by his real name. She didn't just fail him, she hated him. This wasn't one bad decision. It was a campaign of abuse that lasted for years. It ended with a 12-year-old boy alone, starving, locked in a room, dying. Your Honor, there's no sentence long enough, no punishment severe enough to reflect the depth of suffering that Gavin endured and the complete absence of humanity that was shown to him by the defendant.
Brace yourself. This is Nicole giving her statement to the court. And yes, she cries through the whole thing. But again, this, in my opinion, this is not remorse. This is a panic attack. She's freaked out because she's going to go to prison and she's going to be treated really poorly and she won't get to see her husband or whatever.
No, I'm sorry. I want to say I'm truly sorry. I am.
But I got caught.
But Gavin did pass away in my care. I should have done better by him.
You think?
He's deserved better. And I wish I could go back and change so many things, but I can't.
Okay, a stray dog deserves better. A rat deserves better. Like, spiders deserve better. Give me a break, woman.
I need to tell all the people that have been impacted sorry. Nolan, Brixton, Tyler, Shane, but most importantly, Gavin's family. And Gavin, I'm so sorry that I failed him. I'm just sorry, Gavin.
Thank you. Scott, there was sentencing last week for Mr. Peterson, and my guess is that you've heard that I had some harsh words for him last week. And I don't want you to think, and frankly, I don't need to repeat myself, except for you weren't here.
So these sentences were exactly a week apart. And of course, she and Shane aren't in contact.
This case is difficult, not because I don't know what to do with you, but because I don't know how to convey to you, not a word that conveys the horrific nature of what happened here. I long ago stopped saying I've seen everything, because I've said that a few times in my life and then something comes up. I don't want you to think that I think that this is the worst case I have ever seen, because I'm not going to say that. There's always room for something worse. But this is one of the most horrific cases I have ever seen.
We'll skip past when she reads the same letter as we heard before.
The only thing that comes close to it is I read a lot of books regarding World War II. And by read, I mean I listen to.
I love that. Audiobooks are books. In case you needed to hear that.
I was reading a book recently about World War II prisoners of war who suffered unimaginable isolation, deprivation of basic human needs and conditions, starved, their heads were shaved, they were given numbers instead of names. And part of the reason for that was to dehumanize them. Those people that perpetrated that abuse have gone down in history of the absolute worst parts of our civilization and of humankind. That, I agree, pales in comparison, and I am not in any way comparing this in terms of a broad application. But individually, as I listened to the description of what they did to those adults and how it broke them, and how so many of them, first of all, they did anything to survive. But those comparisons rang so true to me about what you did to Gavin.
Can you imagine being called a Yahtzee as a parent? Now, that would be heartbreaking for someone with a heart. I think she tried hard to reach Nicole, and unfortunately, I don't know that anything can reach her, but let's hope that did.
And you still do claim a problem that, as far as I can tell, did not exist. Gavin, as far as anyone besides you and Shane, did not describe a child with behavioral issues. Those are things, frankly, that other people would have seen. People would have experienced at school, and yet, as far as I'm aware, there is absolutely no report of that. But from you and Shane, and then perpetrated, I think, somewhat through Tyler. He was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, but truthfully, I'm not sure I believe that. It sounds to me like for a very long period of time, Gavin tried to do everything he could to earn affection from you and from his dad. He tried to be compliant. He didn't start to, and maybe the urination, defecation thing, maybe there's some truth to that, but let's all remember you'd locked him in his room, and I'm not quite sure how he was supposed to overcome that. All of those reports to his psychologist are self-reports. I can imagine this little boy sitting in the doctor's office with you, and I noticed that you were at all of the appointments and his dad was at some of the appointments, and agreeing with whatever you said about him. One, because if he crossed you, you were going to punish him.
Yep.
And two, because he wanted to survive. He wanted to live. He wanted to go to school. He wanted to be able to eat with the family. He wanted to be able to go to the barbecues. He wanted to be able to go to Lagoon.
So if her stepmother or dad was present, of course he was going to go, yeah, I'm a bad kid. And on some level, he might have even believed it, which is another level of tragedy. And just side note for those who are not Utahns, Lagoon is the amusement park here.
Is that he was willing to agree with whatever you said in those therapy sessions. You were the architect of all of this. Shane may have played more of a passive role, but I don't think for a minute that you weren't the architect of Gavin's destruction.
Gavin's destruction.
That at the beginning, did you anticipate, if I play my cards right, Gavin's going to starve to death? I don't think that's true about you. I don't see that in your personality. Going back 5 years, day after day, event after event, you had the opportunity to put a stop to it. Some of the directions that you gave Tyler and some of the things that he was instructed to do, and then you watched on the camera whether or not he was doing it, that you said have him turn his face so we can see him that he has the soap in his mouth.
Watch the little end of her braid there. The more it shakes, the more schadenfreude I feel.
You could see whether or not when he was laying down, if he had his arms stretched out the right way and his palms up or down. Don't think for a minute that I believe that you were unaware of what was going on with that little boy. You knew exactly what was going on with that little boy. You did everything you could to strip Gavin of his humanity. He had these little slivers of validation and love. The bus driver loved him more than you did. The bus driver cared for him more than you did. The lunch ladies cared for him more than you did. And in fact, when you found out that those people were helping him, you put a stop to it. You prohibited people from taking care of him.
She kept saying she hates him. She effing hates him. Other people wanted to take care of him. Why didn't you just say, here, take care of him? I don't want to deal with him. Why? Unless you're a sadist. I don't understand.
You were the one that was feeding him feces from a bowl prior to any of his self-consumption. But the fact that he realized that how disgusting that would have been, the fact that he decided that he would try and survive by eating his own feces and his own vomit, that tells you
Like that.
it's my turn to talk. I believe it did happen like that. And you pled guilty to murder. You acknowledged that you were the one that caused these events that led to his death.
It didn't happen like that. Well, the evidence begs to differ, Nicole.
And I think that it's fair for you to hear that in this forum, because otherwise people are going to hear what is in this mitigation report.
And this mitigation report, this is why I said what the judge says about the whole abuse claims. This is beautiful.
I have no fault with the mitigation report itself, except for 99% of it is based on self-report. I think 99% of it is false. It's not verifiable. It's directly contrary to the evidence. And I think that you have spent so much time over the last years making up excuses about why you did what you did that I'm curious if even your allegations of being an abused child are true. Now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that they are.
She's trying to breathe out. So she's literally trying to control a panic attack. She's not actually crying for remorse, guilt, sadness.
About what you went through.
Again,
And I
poor
don't
baby.
think there's hardly anything in there that is true. Because it all came from you, and none of it can be verified.
She doesn't give us what else is listed in there. She's just calling her out on that it's bull, which I love.
Nicole affirms that Gavin was fed adequately in the home and that food was not withheld from him. She said she was in absolute
Another
disbelief
gasp.
that Gavin's illness could be severe enough to have caused him to expire. In response, she performed life-saving measures, CPR, and placed him in the shower in attempts to revive him prior to the arrival of EMS medical personnel.
Okay, so is she just stupid or is she delusional? Because Ruby Frankie, when she heard that her kids were brought to the hospital, was like, "But why?" Like, I do wonder if on some level, if you see a child like deteriorate slowly, if you don't realize what's happening. But she still deserves everything. So but it is kind of weird that it's like, what? He wasn't deprived of food. Why would he have to go to the doctor? What?
Nicole made attempts to help Gavin for many years, specifically to save him from the abuse at his mother's home.
That's rich. No, I have no idea, no clue if he experienced anything bad in his mother's home. Something that Shane managed to fight it in court and get full custody. I don't know what evidence he had. What? He would still be alive if he had been allowed to live with his mother.
Tragically, her failure to understand her own trauma history means she was blind to seeing the extent of her actions. I don't think any of that is true, and I think you know that that is true. And that's what makes this case so hard. You are not the victim here. I don't know if you have ever been a victim, but you were never the victim of Gavin.
Mic drop. You were never the victim here.
And for you in any way, shape, or form to try and convey that you were is offensive and disturbing and unexplainable to me. I want to take a few minutes and address the family members, specifically Mom.
Schneider's so fantastic. She has just a good heart. But she addresses Gavin's mother and the rest of his family and says, I hope that you can find some way to heal. Maybe she suggests maybe raising some money and creating a garden where they and other people can come to feel peace and feel close to Gavin and to find some sort of healing, but find some way to memorialize him and to make some good come out of this horrible tragedy. So again, she's just a fabulous judge and a human, unlike Nicole and Shane.
Those people that did show an interest and tried to do within the bounds of what they had to make a difference in Gavin's life. First of all, I want to acknowledge for those people, your instincts were correct. I think that we live in a world where the environment and the culture is such that we shouldn't interfere.
Imagine feeling bad, like, should I report anything? Maybe something's going on and I'll get the parents in trouble and I'm overreacting. To know that, no, your gut was right and this still happened. On the one hand, what if it had happened and you didn't report it? You'd feel so much worse. What if? At least they know I did report it. I did what I could. I was right. My gut was right. So next time, yeah, you can report it again, please.
You're never really going to see your children.
So she's kind of giving Nicole a little bit more in her face. You're going to be stripped of your parental rights of the one minor child you still have. You're not going to be able to see your grandkids.
And I want you to understand that that is minor in comparison, first of all, of what you have done. But it's minor in comparison to, I think, for what you deserve. You are going to go down to prison. Your dignity will remain intact. And it can remain intact because we don't do that to other human beings.
But she did.
I agree with the aggravating factors that were outlined. Efforts to cover up and to minimize what happened is a specific aggravating factor. Now, I recognize that you've pled to obstruction of justice, and this is on top of that and involves the conduct that was not included in the obstruction charges. And there was a lot of that.
She's adding obstruction as an aggravating factor, even though obstruction was something she pled to, because she says there's more obstruction than you even pled to and were charged with. So again, I love this judge. She's fantastic.
There are no mitigating circumstances as it relates to this case. And for that reason, I am going to run all of these counts and all of these charges consecutive with each other.
Because of the Ruby Franke case and this case, there were some bills proposed to go through the Utah legislature. One that would make child having a minimum 15-year sentencing. And then the other one to make it harder for parents to pull their kids out and homeschool if they've had CPS reports against them. The first one, they decided not to vote on it this year. And the second one received a lot of pushback because, oh, parents' rights. And I understand that, but if the idea is not like every family who homeschools would have to have a background check, although honestly, that might not be a bad idea in my opinion. But the idea was if you have had a CPS report called on you, then they should do a background check before you're allowed homeschool. I think that's a good idea considering, hello, all the loopholes, how easy it is to cover this kind of crap up and not actually homeschool. Movement, you know, Sherry Franke and Kevin are pushing for this kind of stuff to get through, hopefully next year. But that's the sentencing we have so far on his father and his stepmother. Again, we're still waiting on Tyler to be sentenced because he's getting more testing done to see how culpable he is. But he too, I believe, has pled guilty. In Kevin's, he got justice, at least for his father and stepmother, not even a year after his death. Bless little Gavin. And hopefully he will have a legacy that is good and positive, and then we'll save other children because he deserved so much more than that. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, like the video, give us a subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss anything. And let your friends know. While you're at it, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this video, or if there's any other cases you'd like me to follow. If you don't have a direct comment, leave some chocolate emojis or your comfort food of choice. I know it's a heavy one. I definitely need to get some chocolate, and I suggest you do too.